Hello, beautiful. Welcome to Thursday Talks with me, Suzanna Kaye. I'm so excited to be back. It was a rough week last week, and I missed you terribly when I couldn't see you. So I am back. Today we are talking about how to make decisions when you feel stuck when you're organizing your home. And we are going to have an entire series dedicated to home organizing, making those decisions, figuring out where to put things, how to decide where to put things, all that good stuff. So I'm really excited about this series that this one topic turned into as I planned it out. Hey, Lynn, great to see you. As you hop on, let me know in the comments where you're joining me from, who you are, so I can see who's here. But it's great to see you, Lynn. And I'm so glad that you're ready to get unstuck. So let's get you started on that, right? So if you ever get that paralyzed feeling when you simply don't know how to even make a decision on things in your home, we're talking about either whether to keep it or let it go, or where to even store it sometimes, then this is going to be the series for you. We're going to go in depth into making the decisions, how to get unstuck, and all that goes into figuring out where to store things when you're organizing in your home, how to find more space, how to figure out what space something should go in, how to let go of things, how to store things, everything. So for the next 15 sessions, I guess, of their Thursday Talks, we will be deep diving into this very complex topic of how to figure out how to organize your home. So real quick, before we dive into today's topic of really getting to the core of making those decisions and what blocks us, how to figure out to get past those blocks, I wanted to say hi to Jane. Hello, Jane. Great to see you again. And Suzanne is here. And we have Sam's from California. Brenda's here from Kentucky. Hi, Brenda. And G, she says, looking forward to this class. Awesome. So glad you're here. And Jane says, good to see you. Glad you're here. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was sick last week and involved a day in the hospital and 5 days not even able to sit up. And it was a rough week. It's been about 2 weeks overall. So it's just so nice to be back with you guys into the land of the living. And thank you so much for your patience. And I've never canceled a Thursday talk before. So, I must have felt rotten, but I'm back. And I don't plan to do that again. Hey, Nancy, great to see you. Hey, Ruth. And Janelle is here. And P is here from New Jersey. Welcome, Wendy and Peg. Great to see you again, Peg. And good to see Kathy. Brenda says, yikes. Yeah, it was definitely rough. Definitely rough. Lovely Marie says, blessings to all. Hi, Marie. All right. So let's dive in because there is so much that I want to tell you about this topic. That's why I have broken this down into an entire series about organizing and decision-making in your home. It's kind of 3 mini series in 5 parts each. So 15 parts total now through August. But we will be deep diving. I'll tell you more about the rest of the series towards the end. But today, like I mentioned, we are talking about how to make decisions when you feel stuck, when you feel paralyzed, you're not sure how to even make the decision. So how do we get past those mental blocks? Well, first off, let's talk about what are the blocks, right? And if any of these resonate with you, do me a favor, hit the like button or the heart, or tell me in the comments what resonates with you. But there are a number of common reasons that we get stuck when trying to make decisions on items in our home, either whether to keep them or let them go, or where to store them or how to store them. So let's talk over some of these blocks really quickly, and some of the things that can get past some of these blocks. So one of the most common blocks that I hear when you're feeling paralyzed and uncertain how to make a decision on a thing is the fear of making the wrong decision. Let me know if you can relate to that one. But this would be where maybe you're afraid that you will find out later that another choice was better and you'll regret your decision, or you're afraid that your decision will have consequences that you might not have seen coming up. So being afraid of making the wrong decision can paralyze you to the point where you don't make any decision at all. So when you are facing the fear of making the wrong decision, a couple of questions you can ask yourself is this a permanent decision, or can you change your mind later? So some examples would be, an example of a non-permanent decision would be setting up your file folders for your paper organizing system. Even if it takes some time to set them up, you can always change what file folders and what they're set up as, how they're organized, what they're labeled. You can always change them again later if you find that it was not the best choice for you. So that's an impermanent decision. A permanent decision would be something like throwing away a piece of memorabilia that you don't think that you want anymore. That's a permanent decision. It is now gone. You cannot get it back. So your first question to ask yourself is this a permanent decision, or is it possible to change your mind and reverse that decision, do something different later? And even if it is a permanent decision, that does not mean that you don't make the decision. We're just gathering information here to get past that fear, right? So another way to get past the fear of making the wrong decision, ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen? So if you make this decision, then what is the worst thing that could happen if you make a decision that might not have been the best choice for you? So an example would be maybe with that memorabilia that you threw away and you later on regretted it. Well, the worst that could happen is that you regret letting go of that piece of memorabilia, and it makes you sad for, anytime you think about it. So living with some regret probably won't kill you, but that would be probably the worst that would happen if you let go of that memorabilia, living with that feeling of regret and maybe some sadness or guilt. Now, another example would be if your decision was to shred the only copy of a recent tax return document and you got audited, then, well, the worst that could happen would possibly be some financial consequences for not having that if you were to get audited. So that could be the worst that could happen if you were to shred a paper that it turned out that you needed later for a tax audit. So some possibly major financial consequences. Those are two examples of what the worst thing is that could happen with a decision. Now, again, these are worst case scenarios that you're trying to think of. And it helps to think of the worst case scenarios because then your next question is, will you live through the worst possible outcome? So for that memorabilia example, that regret, you will live through the regret and the feelings of a little guilt and sadness. It will lessen over time. It will not take over your day-to-day life, and it definitely will not kill you. You can still have a very happy life, even with, we've all got something that we regret, right? Or something that we lost or let go of accidentally that we think of from time to time. So will you live through it? Will you live through not having that document during a tax audit? Yes, you will live through it. That worst possible outcome, you might have some financial loss because of it. Could be major. Like absolute worst case scenario would be jail time if you were, committing fraud. Probably won't die from it. You would still live through even the worst case scenario. So, but of course, very highly unlikely that you would even get audited and things like that. So will you live through the worst possible outcome of making that decision? So when you are feeling that fear of making the wrong decision, some of the questions that you can ask are, just to recap, is this a permanent decision or can you change your mind later? Now, if it's a permanent decision, that just means you might want to take an extra moment to think it through. It does not mean that you don't necessarily do it. And if it's a permanent decision, then you walk through these next questions. If it's a decision where you can change your mind later, do it. Try it out. Test it. See if you like it, because you can always change your mind later, such as setting up a file cabinet in a way that you don't normally, try out a new organizational system. That makes that decision so much easier. It's not a permanent decision. You can always change your mind later. Go ahead, try it out and do it. If it is a permanent decision, then ask what's the worst that could happen. absolute worst case scenario, 99.9% chance it won't happen, but what is the absolute worst thing that could happen? And that worst thing, would you live through it? How would you handle it if that worst thing were to happen? And could you still have a happy life afterwards? And that can lessen the fear of making the wrong decision, because at least you can see that, okay, even if it was the worst decision you could make, the worst thing happened, which is highly unlikely, you still would be able to make it through. So those are some ways to get through that fear of making the wrong decision. Now, before I go through the next common block that we come up with, I just wanted to say hi to a couple people really quickly. We have Stephanie's here. Hey, Stephanie, great to see ya. And we have Mary is here. She says 5 weeks after her husband's knee surgery. I'm so glad that you're back, and hopefully he recovered well. I know that's a major surgery, but hopefully it was life-changing in a good way for him. Glad to have you back. Hey, Joanne, great to have you. Jane says, yes, that's the one as far as the fear of making the wrong decision. That's probably one of the most common reasons that people get paralyzed, is being afraid of making the wrong decision. And we've all made wrong decisions, right? I know I have, and I've lived through every single one of them. Hey, Rosila, good to see you. And Susan from Wisconsin. Melissa's here from Florida. Nice and hot here along with you. I'm here in Orlando. Melissa, as far as fear of making the wrong decision, she can relate. She says, amen, I can. She's always afraid of making a mistake. It's so paralyzing. And you know what? Part of it is just accepting that you will make mistakes. You will absolutely make mistakes, and you will live through them. That's the big thing. You'll make the mistakes no matter how much research you do, and you will live through them. So number 2, as far as what are the blocks that get in our way of making decisions with items in our homes? Number 2 is a lack of knowledge. You don't have any idea what solution choices even are. I hear this one a lot, especially when people are trying to decide where to store something. So that's why we have our junk drawers. That's why we sometimes have those piles on the kitchen counter or on the dining room table of all those unmade decisions, items that don't have a home. Well, if you are suffering from that fear of a lack of knowledge because you're drawing a blank as to what to even do with the item, here are some ways to get past that. First off, Google it. You can Google, how to store reading glasses if you're trying to figure out where to store your reading glasses, or creative ideas for craft room storage. Between Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, all the different blogs out there, if you Google your question, you'll probably come up with a bunch of answers. Then my favorite option is ask for ideas in your community. So we have the Home Organizing Challenges Facebook group. If you're not already part of that group, I highly recommend you join it. Even if you don't check Facebook all the time, maybe join it just to go only to that group. But ask for ideas from your community. Ask other people. Ask people who either are very good at organizing, or maybe they aren't and they struggle with it as well, and you can brainstorm together. But when you ask for ideas from your community, they can come up with some amazing ideas that you might not have even thought of. So asking others for that help is really useful. Then sometimes if you can't ask for help, or along with asking for help, when you start to get some of these ideas, you can also brainstorm and mind map. Now, when you're brainstorming, the best way to do this is to just write a list of all the different possible ideas that you have, especially if they are ridiculous. Because the sillier your answers, the less you constrain what your options are when you're brainstorming, the more likely your brain is going to get creative and come up with something really good. So write down even the answers that you know aren't a great solution, but they're silly. It could be an idea like duct taping them to the wall. Write it down and just let your brain free flow any possible idea. And once you do that, you lift the restrictions on your brain, you will find that you will come up with some creative ideas that you never thought were even in your head, because you weren't limiting yourself. So just writing out and brainstorming or mind mapping is a great way to come up with some ideas when you feel like you don't have any solutions. And then finally, list, and we're going to go into this, I think in 2 weeks, in 1 or 2 weeks in the series, write a list of the criteria needed for the solution. So, like I said, we will go much more in depth into this in one of the upcoming parts of the series. But if you write out what is required for your solution. So, if one example, if we're talking about where to store your reading glasses, well, what do you need from your storage of your reading glasses? You probably need to access them easily. You might need to access them in a specific area. Maybe you need to be able to access your reading glasses in your craft area all the time. With reading glasses, if you don't buy them from the dollar store like I do, then you might need something where they won't get scratched up. So they need to be protected. How large of a space do you need? How often do you need to access them? Do other people need to access them as well? Is there a specific area of your home that you need access in more often? Is it a large or heavy item where you can't put it really high up or really low down in the ground? What are all of the different criteria that are needed for the storage of this item? And that can help you then look at that list of criteria and go, okay, what spaces fit this criteria? So write a list of the criteria needed for the solution. So when you're suffering from that lack of knowledge fear that's blocking you because you don't even know where to start, you don't have any ideas for the solutions, you can Google it. You can do my favorite, post the question, even with a picture. A lot of times with a picture, you get so many different ideas. Post a question in our Facebook group. Say, hey, I'm trying to figure out where to store this. What would you do? I promise you're going to get a ton of ideas, or any other community that you happen to have and you're connected to. Brainstorm, especially brainstorming, even the silliest ideas will open your brain up to some creative solutions. And then write a list of the criteria needed for your solution. What your perfect solution would have, what it has to have in order to be a good solution. So those are the ways to combat that feeling of that lack of knowledge when you don't have a clue, even one answer to your problem. So before we go to the next one, really quickly, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this video, share it. Click the share button and share it on your social media. Email it to anybody that you think would enjoy it. The more you share these, the better it is for me to be able to continue doing these each week and to go so in depth and I guess put forth all of the organization and the ideas for these. So share this with people, whoever you think might enjoy it. I would love that. And let's check out really quickly. I wanted to see, let's see. So Peg says she heard about a new book. I've not heard this one yet. The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. It sounds good. Interesting. I will definitely have to check that one out. I haven't even heard of that one yet. Thank you. And someone says, use painter's tape. It's easy to remove. I use painter's tape all the time. That's such a great solution. And if you're going to label something, if it's a temporary label, painter's tape is perfect. I do that whenever I reorganize an area. And I label the front of all the drawers, or I'll label the cabinets so that I remember what's inside. Glenda's here from Texas. Hey, Glenda. And Ruth says that she's loving this. Aw, thank you, Ruth. I'm so glad. Perfect. All right. So, and remember, if there's anything that I say that that resonates with you and that you can relate to, please, in the comments, let me know, or click the heart or the like. That always helps me know what is helpful for you. Okay. So far we've gone over 2 of the blocks that we most commonly come up against when we are trying to make a decision with items in our home. We talked about the fear of making the wrong decision. And we talked about a lack of knowledge. We simply don't even have a clue what our choices are. So number 3, we have 4 of these total that we'll talk about. Number 3 is you're afraid that you don't know all of the options and you might have missed a better choice. This is where we get into that analysis paralysis, We want to research even more. What if, you have a list of solutions? What if there's something better out there that you don't know about yet? Maybe you're looking to purchase a desktop file holder for your action file, for example, and you've researched and you found a bunch of them that you think might work, but you're afraid to hit the button to buy the one that you think that you want, because what if, as soon as you do, you find another one out there that you think will be better? So let me know in the comments, do you get stuck in analysis paralysis? Do you ever get afraid of the fact that you might not know additional information and then regret it later? So I've heard this referred to somewhere as FOBO. Instead of FOMO, the fear of missing out, it's the fear of a better option. FOBO, FOBO. You might never feel confident that you've made the right choice, but sometimes when you are the type of person who suffers from FOBO, the fear of a better option, sometimes it's the simple act of breaking down this new feeling, this processing, this new feeling of being uncertain and making the decision anyways. Break it down to small bite-sized steps. And as you know, with me, everything works out so much better if you can break it down into steps. You might never feel confident that you made the right decision. You might always wonder if there is another choice out there. That's okay. So the first step to this is to be okay with feeling uncomfortable every once in a while. Try making a decision on one thing where you're still not 100% sure, but you've done some research and you think that you found something good. Try making that decision and just sitting with that feeling of uncertainty and realizing it does not kill you. Realizing that, let yourself feel it. But the more often that you let yourself feel that and you experience the fact that it does not kill you, the faster that feeling will go away each time. So the more often you try it and you do it, the more your mind and your body will get used to that feeling and start a new pattern of realizing, okay, you know what? It didn't kill me. I lived through that. The feeling faded. And it'll get shorter and shorter each time until the point where you can make those decisions confidently and not even ever hit that fear of making the wrong decision. All right. So if you are worried that you don't know all the options and you might have missed a better choice, the big thing is avoiding analysis paralysis. These days, we have so many options available to us for everything. With the internet, simply buying a desktop file holder means we have probably 100,000 choices available at our fingertips. There's no way to research them all. So the way we get past the fact that you will never know all of the options, there is not enough time in the world to spend all of that time looking up every option. Here are some ways. First off, set a limit for the amount of time or the number of solutions you will research and find before you make your decision. That time limit or that number of options that you plan to find will vary based on how high the stakes are for the decision. So if this is a major decision, if you're buying a car, then you are going to give yourself a longer time limit and allow yourself to find more options than if you are buying a desktop file holder for your action file, right? Because that car, we're looking $20,000, $30,000 versus $10 to $20. So lower stakes, lower time limit, set yourself maybe 1 hour of research time or less. For me, a lot of times I will give myself maybe 15 or 30 minutes, explore what options are out there. And then once the time's up, I have to make my decision. Or you can do a number of solutions. Once you find 5 options for that file folder, then you must choose between those 5. You found 5 that would work. Which one do you like of those 5? especially because that's a low stakes option. With cars, obviously, I research them longer, but setting that time limit, maybe you give yourself 2 weeks to do the research, or you decide to find the top 10 types of cars that fit your criteria that you decided need to happen in that car. And then when you set your deadline to make a decision, the hard part is you have to force yourself to actually commit and make that decision. And then we're back to that sitting in that fear for a little bit. Once you've made the decision, you might worry and try to undo the decision or want to undo the decision. You might want to keep researching, see if you got the best deal. Do not let yourself continue to research. Once you made the decision, let it be commitment, let it be final. Stop researching after that. Sit with the uncomfortableness of not being certain if it was the right decision, because you know that you will live through it. You know that even if it's not the best decision, it's a good decision. And sometimes a good decision is enough. All right. So just as a reminder, these Thursday talks, the public ones, are also available as a podcast. So check it out. The link is in the description of the video. But check out the podcast version as well so that you can listen on the go or while you're organizing. Really quickly, Glenda says, my husband gets stuck. Yes, my husband gets stuck, especially with the not knowing all the options. After he commits to something, then he likes to keep researching, wondering if he made the right choice. And one of the best things he ever did for himself, as far as his confidence, was stop researching once he made that choice and just let it be. And be okay with, if he finds a better option was out there, be okay with the fact that his option's still good. So I hear ya. Susan says, oh yeah, FOBO indeed. Fear of the better option. She can relate. Yeah. Glenda says, I am a make it happen person. Select and move on. That is wonderful. There's a lot of freedom to being the type of person who can make a decision quickly and move on. That's awesome. Love it. So Peg says, options for remodel choices: the tile for the backsplash, the top of the floor, the cabinet color, etc. Yes. Those are the types of things we can get stuck in, that analysis paralysis. We can be afraid that we made the wrong choice. Sometimes if it's something like that where there is an expert who can assist with the decision, maybe you pick your top 5 favorites and you ask an interior designer, pay them a little bit of money and say, hey, what do you think about these different options? Help me decide. And then you have to trust them and listen to the expert and make your decision after consulting with them. You don't have to make this decision that they choose, but once you've consulted, actually take their advice, make your decision. But yes, sometimes it's good. Get an expert's opinion or ask your community. Susan said, give it its due, no more and no less. Absolutely love it. Lynn says, how do I sit with the decision? Give me exact steps if possible. So when I say sitting with the decision, I mean, once you actually commit and you make that decision, you forced yourself, you've done the amount of time of research that you said, you found the number of options, you've chosen the best that you know how to choose from those options based on what you know today. Once you've made that choice, the simple step of sitting with the decision is literally just sitting and feeling the fears that come up and talking yourself, like giving yourself the responses to those fears. So let's talk about those tiles and backsplashes and all of those home decoration choices Peg's going through, because that's terrifying, right? It feels like a permanent decision and it can be expensive to undo if you don't like it. So that's a great example. Once you've made your decision, you've chosen your tile and you've scheduled the tilers to put it up, sit and feel how that feels. Feel the scared feeling and give your brain those responses that we talked about before. So we're going to go back really quickly just to review some of these. Because once you've made your decision, the fear of making the wrong decision is kicked in, right? So now it's not even looking for a better option. You're afraid that you made the wrong choice. So then you go through your questions. You go, is this a permanent decision or can I change my mind later? For tile, I can change my mind later and get different tile. It might be more expensive, but it is possible if I absolutely hate it. What is the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen, I hate the tile and I have a choice. Do I hate it enough to pay to choose a different one? Or can I choose to live with it? The worst that can happen is just not liking how the tile looks. And then will you live through that worst possible outcome? You know what? I think I made the best choice with this tile. And I'm not positive, but whatever the outcome is, whether I love it or I hate it, I will live through it. And it will not affect my entire life. I can still have a happy life, even if the worst possible outcome of hating the tile happens. So sit with the feeling, let yourself feel scared, let yourself feel all the feels, and ask yourself the questions. You know, is it permanent? What's the worst thing that can happen? If the worst thing happened, what would I do? And then just let it be that commitment. Say, you know what? I already chose it. I'm going to see what happens, because that worst possible outcome is unlikely. Most likely, I will either love it or like it enough. So sit with it, feel it. And each time you do that, every single time that you make a decision and then you allow yourself to just feel those feelings, not keep researching, not keep questioning, just feel, it will get easier. And the more often you practice that, the shorter amount of time you will feel those feelings, to the point where if you practice it often enough, as many times as you can, repetition, small bites and repetition, those are our things. The more often you do it, the shorter amount of time of that fear, the faster your brain will realize you're going to get past it, to the point where you will be able to make decisions without that fear creeping in anymore, or creeping in for just a second or two. So just simply practice until you get there. Hopefully that helps answer that question. So it's a good question. All right, so we talked about our blocks. We talked about fear of making the wrong decision. We talked about a lack of knowledge, not even knowing what our choices are. We talked about that FOBO, fear of a better option. You're afraid you don't know all the options and you might have missed a better choice, which then, once you've made your decision, it becomes fear of having made the wrong decision. The final one is avoidance of consequences. Now, this is one that I also see really often. I've never heard anybody else address this one before, but the avoidance of consequences means you are afraid to make the decision, because then whatever happens next, you're avoiding. So this is where you choose to decide later, because really your gut kind of knows the answer, but it's not ready to deal with either the actions or the feelings that will be the consequence of making the decision. This one ties in also to that fear of making the wrong choice, because the consequence of regret. You're afraid of the regret if it was the wrong choice. So you're going to avoid making the decision altogether because you're afraid of possible regret in the future. So some of the consequences that we can be afraid of and avoid making a decision so we can avoid the consequence include, you're afraid it'll take too long to do the decided solution. So an example of this would be, if you decide, okay, well, I want to be able to store my reading glasses in the top drawer of my craft table, but the top drawer of my craft table is overstuffed and cluttered, so there's not currently room. You are afraid that it will take too long to then declutter that top drawer to find a space for your reading glasses, so you don't make the decision of where to put the reading glasses at all, because the decision your gut is telling you will possibly take a long time to do. So you just don't make the decision at all, so you don't then have to declutter that drawer, right? So avoiding that the solution will take too long to do, so you avoid the decision altogether. It'll cost money. Sometimes we're afraid of making the decision because we know that our gut's telling us the right answer is something that costs money, and we're simply afraid of spending that money right now. It'll take energy and effort. Sometimes we avoid even making the decision because the decision we know that our gut is telling us is the answer means that it will require energy and effort. And we don't feel like putting in that energy and that effort right now. Others will judge or disagree or push back on our decision. Sometimes we avoid making that decision because we are afraid of the response from other people. We're afraid of the decision of choosing that tile backsplash because what if other people think it's ugly? We're afraid of making the decision of storing the Christmas items in the garage because our spouse will disagree and think that the Christmas decorations should be stored in the attic. So we don't want that judgment and that pushback. So that's an avoidance of the consequence, that we might avoid making the decisions. That way we don't have to deal with what other people think and say. Or sometimes we're afraid that it's going to be emotionally or mentally difficult. So sometimes you have that item, you've tried to donate it, you've tried to give it away, nobody wants it. You know that the decision is to throw it away, but that fear of the guilt for throwing away an item that you think could still possibly be useful to somebody someday, you're afraid of that, the feelings of guilt and that weight. You're afraid of letting go of the item because you're afraid of going through the process of letting go, that grief of letting go of the item, the possible regret in the future. So the fourth reason that we tend to have problems making decisions and we have blocks is we're avoiding the consequence of the decision. Usually we already know in our hearts what the decision is. We're just not ready for that next step. So avoidance of consequences, just a quick recap of those. It'll take too long to do the decision that you decided on. It'll cost money and you're not ready to spend the money right now. It'll take energy and effort and you're just tired and don't want to put forth the energy. Others will judge you, disagree, or push back. So you're avoiding the reaction or possible reaction from others. Or it'll be emotionally or mentally difficult. You're avoiding the emotions that would come with that solution. So really quickly, just a reminder, this is also in the text of the video description. If you want to get reminders by text whenever I'm going live or I have an event coming up, then text the phrase, just the word loop, L-O-O-P, nothing else, just the word loop, to the phone number 407-214-4420, and you can get in on my text message reminders. So just a reminder there. All right, so before I go to the last little bit, which is the solution to all of this, wrapping it up, and how do we get past all of these? We know our fears, we know what the blocks are, and some of the thoughts past it. How do we put it into action? Before we go into that next, really quickly, let me know in the comments which of these resonated with you. All right, so tell me which one of these resonated with you the most, which one can you relate to the most, which one do you tend to find is your problem the most, okay? So let me know that in the comments. And really quickly, G says, love text message reminders. Yay, good. Yeah, everybody seems to love them, and it's easy to turn them off if you ever want to. Lovely Marie says, thank you for making the looking at it in a different way in my heart. Yeah, that's the hard part, but it gets so much easier the more you do it. I promise. Joanne says that she can relate to where to store it, and it will take too long to prepare the space. Yes, and we're going to talk about some of those issues that come up in future parts of the series. So we will go more into that. All right, so the big solution for all of this is to get curious. Get curious. Whenever you're feeling blocked and like you're unable to make a decision and you're paralyzed, get curious. You don't have to even make the decision. You don't have to come up with a brilliant idea. You don't have to do anything besides get curious about why you're blocked. that's the first step to getting past this. Identifying what your blocks are, because a lot of times we don't know what our block is even. We just feel paralyzed, but we stop asking questions beyond that. We say, I can't even make the decision. We walk away and we leave it at that. But if next time you feel that paralyzed feeling whenever you're trying to make a decision, don't stop there. Ask yourself some questions and get curious about it. So get curious when you feel blocked. Let yourself feel what other feelings are coming up. Ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself, okay, well, what am I afraid of? It's always a fear. When you're paralyzed, it's always a fear. It's a fear that you don't know the answer. It's a fear that it's the wrong answer. So if I were to make this decision, like what feelings do I start to feel when I'm trying to think of making the decision? Am I afraid that I don't know the answer? Am I afraid of making the wrong choice? Am I afraid of what all would be involved if I make the decision? Start to ask yourself which of those fears is the root of it. You don't have to then make the decision or do anything else besides explore the why. And you'll start to find that each person's different, but you will have certain themes. You will find certain things are your common fear. And that's when you see that pattern, you can start to make some of those adjustments that we talked about earlier. So an example is when you get curious, you feel blocked, you're not sure what to do. Are you afraid of having no solutions? If you really sit and feel that and you realize, I'm afraid that I have no clue where to even start. So something like the reading glasses, I'm afraid I don't have any idea where to even start to figure out where to keep these. Then ask for ideas in your community, like we talked about, such as the Facebook group. Or if you're a Pathfinder, one of our Path members, that's a perfect place. Ask for ideas and get some help from the community. An example would be like when you think about it, you think, I know I should keep my reading glasses in my craft area, but I don't have space. How do I make more space? Ask the community, Google it. The community might come up with some things like, hey, add more storage. Maybe there's an ottoman with storage in it or a shelf, or find a creative solution. They might come up with the idea of, hey, keep a pair hanging from your pen cup. So that way it's always available, but you'll get all of those extra help and resources by reaching out. If you're afraid of the fear that it's going to take too long, that avoidance of consequences, maybe break it down into small steps. You don't have to do everything right then, but maybe create a plan for how to declutter that space and break it down into some small steps. Maybe, okay, Saturday, I'll spend 15 minutes on that drawer and see what I can let go of, or see what I can put somewhere else, and schedule it on your calendar. Break it down into small steps, and then it won't feel like it's going to take too long. But the more you can get curious and start asking yourself what your fears are, once you label those fears, then you have your solutions. Then you can work through those steps. All right. So let's see in the comments. Remember, tell me which of these resonated with you the most. We have, I'm reading through some of these comments. Susan says, they all apply, but avoidance of consequences really resonated. And I hadn't thought of that one. That is one that I've never heard anybody else talk about, but it's probably my most common one. If I'm delaying a decision, usually I know the decision. I just don't want to deal with doing it. But at that point, if I'm afraid it's going to take too long, I can break it down into small steps, put some of the steps on my calendar, and then that way I've made the decision, and then acting out the steps for the decision can take time, happen over time, instead of it just being a wandering item that never gets that decision made. Lynn says, thanks for defining sit with it. I've heard it elsewhere, but wasn't sure what it meant. Yeah, it's just really literally sitting with it and feeling with it and being in it, because that's what we avoid, right? We decide not to make the decision. We put the thing aside. We'll decide later because we're avoiding feeling the feelings. So feel the feelings and it'll make those decisions easier. Someone says avoiding decisions to avoid the consequences was an eye-opener. Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites. Jane says the entire chat, avoidance of consequences, as sometimes the solution isn't feasible due to cost, but it sometimes make me look around my house to repurpose what I already have. Yes, sometimes if you find out that your fear is that it's going to cost money, great. Now you know you're afraid that it's going to cost money. What's another option? Is there somebody giving away an item that would work for it? Do you have something else that might not be perfect, but would suit the solution well enough? There are so many different ways to get past that when you identify it. That's a good one. Peg says, scissors are cheap, so I keep pairs in different rooms. Yes, and I do too, and that's one of those things when you list out your criteria of what you need for storage, maybe you need scissors in the bathroom, the craft area, the kitchen. And when you make your list, then it's a purposeful choice where your scissors are instead of you happen to have, 200 pairs of scissors all over the place just because you don't have a purposeful choice. So, yep, having multiples is okay and having a plan is better. Karen says, so sorry I'm so late. That's okay. Not a problem. The replay will be available for a bit. And Linda says, I'm thinking fear of failure stops me. Yes. Now, when you think of failure, Linda, take that one step further. What are you afraid that you're going to fail out at? Are you afraid that you're going to make the wrong choice? Are you afraid that other people will judge you? Are you afraid that you won't know the answer? Because that fear of failure is really, really common. And a lot of times, though, we don't go deeper. What failure? What are you afraid the consequence will be of that failure? What exactly do you feel are you afraid that you will fail at? Are you afraid that you will not be able to complete the job? That's a reasonable fear of failure. Okay, well, once you figure out what failure you're afraid of, that's when you can start coming up with the solutions. If you're afraid that you won't complete the job, well, the job might be too big. Break it into smaller steps because you can then succeed at multiple small steps instead of a larger project and not be so afraid of failing at it. That's a really, really good one. She's afraid of disappointing myself or others. So it's that consequences, that judgment, right? And then it's okay. Well, what's the worst that would happen? Right? We go back to those questions. So this is a perfect time to recap some of what we talked about, right? And pretty much whenever you identify what your fear is, using these questions that we're about to go over again can help you get past it. So when we are worried about the mental blocks and paralyzed when trying to make a decision, let's talk about these blocks and a little bit of how to get past them. The biggest one with the questions that you're probably going to ask for all of these different solutions is the fear of making the wrong decision. You're afraid that you'll find out later that there was a better choice out there and you're going to regret it. So when you are facing the fear of making a wrong decision, think, is this a permanent choice or could you change your mind later? Is this a semi-permanent or temporary choice? How permanent is this decision? Is there a take back? Is there a way to undo or redo it? What is the worst that could happen? Whether it's a permanent choice or not, what is the absolute worst case scenario? And what is the likeliness of that worst case scenario happening? So the likeliness is probably very slim that the absolute worst case scenario would happen. But knowing what is that worst case scenario and, well, what would you do if that happened? Would you live through that worst possible outcome? If that worst case scenario, which is highly unlikely, did happen, what would you do to handle it? And sometimes, you know what, even I would say throw in this other one. What's the best case scenario? That's one that we forget all the time. And I did not even add it in here. I should have. I'm going to type it in so I can show it on the screen. I think I typed that right. All right. So I'm adding in one more for you. What's the best case scenario? What is the best thing that could happen from this decision? If it's donating the wedding dress that you've held on to forever, the best case scenario is maybe It'll bring you joy knowing that somebody else is going to love it and you're going to get more space in your home. What's the best case scenario for whatever it is that this decision is, if you happen to make it the decision and it happens to be a good one? All right, so number 2 was fear of there's a lack of knowledge, that you don't have any solutions. And remember, if you don't have any clue what options you even have, you can Google it. You can ask your community for ideas. If you're not sure how to organize a space or an item, or you need any ideas, post in the Home Organizing Challenges group. Post a picture and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? And you will get a ton of ideas. People, that's one of their favorite things to do, is help each other out with ideas. Brainstorm and mind map all the possible possibilities, no matter how silly, to get your creative juices flowing, and write down the list of criteria needed for your decision. So what would the solution have to have in order for it to be workable and be an optimal solution? That way you know what all it needs to have. Number 3, being afraid that you don't know all of the options and you might have missed something. FOBO, the fear of a better option. So that regret after making the decision, or the fear that you've not researched enough, the analysis paralysis. So we need to avoid that analysis paralysis. You can do this by limiting the amount of time you research an item. So if it's a low stakes decision, something that can be reversed, something that's not super expensive, then it should be a short amount of time that you spend. You should only find, a handful of possible solutions before making your decision. If it's a higher stakes item, it should be a little bit longer time, and you might want to choose more options to choose from, but set a deadline. So set a deadline to make the decision, and then once that deadline hits, commit to it. Sit with that uncomfortable feeling of what if it was the wrong choice, but based on what you know right now, you made the best decision from all of the options that you know. And then avoidance of consequences. Think about, are you really, you kind of know what the answer to the decision is. You're just avoiding the next steps that come afterwards. So that could be, maybe you're afraid it'll take too long to do whatever that solution is, like declutter a drawer to make more space. Maybe you're afraid it's going to cost money. So once you identify that, you can find some creative solutions around that. You're afraid of the energy and effort that it will take to do it, or you're afraid of what other people will think or say about it, or you're afraid of the emotions that will come up and the feelings if you make that choice. And remember that the solution for all of this is just to get curious, figure out what that root cause is. What is causing that decision paralysis? What's the fear? Because once you label that fear, you can take those steps, take baby steps. This is not a change you everything all at once type of thing, right? This is a try it out, test it out, see how it goes, see that you live through the uncomfortable emotions, see that even if it's not the best choice, a good choice is livable. Test it out and keep trying those solutions one small bite at a time, one small step at a time, right? All right. So just a reminder, if you are one of our Pathfinders, if you're in our membership, at noon today, we will go a little bit more in depth into some of this and how to, like, specific questions to ask in order to help make those decisions. So check that out, noon today. You can find the link in your online library or in the private Facebook group for our Pathfinders, and we'll go much more deeply into that. Really quickly, Sylvia says, this is helping me a lot. Thank you. She's the afraid of failing. Yes, we'll talk about that more with the Pathfinders too, for sure. That's a really good one. And, sometimes allow yourself to just fail, and nobody else is going to notice it beyond just a glimpse. So failure is always something that sits within us that most people don't remember it. So Nancy says, I had a boss who used to tell us the perfect is the enemy of the good. That is so true. So true. Perfection is never the goal unless we're like doing brain surgery. There's very, very few times where perfection is worth the time and energy that it takes. Usually it just blocks us. That's a really good one, Nancy. Thank you. Glenda says an 85% solution is better than no solution. Yes, and remember, you know what? Even unmade decisions is still a decision. So by not making the decision, you are deciding to let the world choose for you, right? So leaving the reading glasses on the counter because you're not sure where to put them, that's making a decision to keep that pair of reading glasses in your point of view, weighing heavily on you, keeping that unmade decision in your sight, adding to the clutter. That's a decision that you've made. You've decided. By not deciding, you've decided to keep that unmade decision going in your life. And that's a very uncomfortable thing. So by not making a decision, either the decision gets made for you, which will probably not be the best choice. You know, you don't make a will because you cannot decide to make your will. Well, if something happens, then probate gets to decide. Did they ever decide in exactly the way that you would want? No. So the decision was made for you and it's not the best choice, right? Your choices, even if they weren't perfect, are probably better than what choices would be made for you by others. Not making decisions where to put things away, that's a decision to let them keep controlling your life and weigh you down. So even unmade decisions, that's still a decision. It's just a decision that you have no control over anymore. So, yep, somebody said, repeated, no decision is still a decision. It absolutely is. And it's not one that you're going to like. So P says, great ideas and wonderful motivation, Susanna. Thank you. You're so welcome. Well, I would love you if you did want to join me over in the Path membership. You can become a Pathfinder anytime. We do live accountability work sessions several times a month. We have our own challenge guides that we do each month, extra Thursday talks, bonus information and downloads and worksheets and things like that are just for Pathfinders, and so many other resources that I share only with the Pathfinders. So if you do want support along your journey, I would love to have you join me as a Pathfinder. And you can join in the link that is in the description. Also, like I mentioned, this is going to be part of a series. This is kind of the introduction to the series. So with the series, we're going to do 5 talks about where to store things, ideas about how to make those decisions of where to keep things in your home. Then we will talk about how to store things. You know, we're talking containers and protecting them and all of the various things with how, what, they should be stored in the closet, but where in the closet. So how to store things is going to be another part of the series. And then we will talk about letting go of things, how to let go of things. So that will be what we wrap up this series with. And a reminder, next week, May 26th, which is Thursday, we have the live webinar with me, 6 p.m. Eastern time, organizing emails and digital files. So if your email inbox drives you crazy, if you're not sure how to find your digital files or how to store them so that you can find them again, I've got some really easy tricks that can help you get all of those under control and you can feel so much more confident. So check out the website store, SusannaKaye.com, and click on store, and you can register for that. Remember, if you are a Pathfinder, you get a discount on any of the webinars, the live webinars. So don't use the store link, use the link in your library. Sound good? All right. Well, I love you so much. I've had a wonderful time with you. G says, when you place the Pathfinder link at the bottom of a window, the controls, something override it. If you can email me, I'm not quite sure what exactly you're asking about, but I would absolutely love to help you with that. The Pathfinder link is in the description of the video if you need to, instead of having to type out the whole thing that is on the screen. You can also go to SusannaKaye.com and click on the store tab, and you can find the link to become a member there as well. So hopefully that helps. But if you still need help, then just shoot me an email, hello@SusannaKaye.com. Email hello@SusannaKaye.com, and I would love to help you out. All right. Well, I will see you next week at both the webinar and the Thursday talk for the rest of our series. I love you so, so much. Have an amazing week. Thank you all so much for your get well wishes. It was wonderful to get so many messages wishing me well as I was struggling through the health issues. Thank you. Thank you. And I love you so much. Make today amazing. Bye-bye now.